We all have gathered here to extend our reach of knowledge. I am Mr. Pratik Kormalwar, Assistant Professor of the Tamagi Institute of Management Studies. Welcome you all to our 2 days case study workshop. We all know the importance of case studies as an instrument of learning, especially in higher studies. But as a faculty, we all face issues while building and executing case studies, don't we? How to make case studies an interesting affair for the students is also a $1,000,000 question. In order to get the answers of these questions, the Tamagi Institute of Management Studies has organized this 2 days workshop that aims at arming the faculties with a skill of developing and delivering an effective case study. We are blessed to have Dr. Ranjit Singh, Professor, IIIT Allahabad, as a resource person for our 2 days workshop. Dr. Singh has more than 18 years of extensive teaching experience. He has published more than 110 quality research papers and authored 15 books in the domain of accounting and finance. He is member of the editorial and review board of many reputed journals in the area of commerce and management. He has been delivering invited talks on many topics in many universities, colleges, and business schools across India and abroad, especially in the area of behavioral finance and entrepreneurship development. Sir has a multifaceted personality as he has written a bestseller fiction novel called Presiding Babu, and he also has one collection of poetry in his kitty. Sir's profile itself states how amazing this workshop will be, isn't it? So now it's time for me, without wasting any time, I would like to ask Dr. Ranjit Singh sir to please enlighten us with today's topic of the workshop, that is developing effective case study. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pratik. So actually it's an honor for me also to present my ideas on developing some case studies in such a prestigious workshop among the people who are they are well versed in their discipline. I could see some faculty here, some senior research persons are also here. So without wasting much time, let us directly go to the topic, that is developing effective case studies. So let me first share the slides. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So the topic is developing effective case study. And being a teacher of management or business administration, we are encountering a problem like how to develop this effective case study. And like most of us, we used to write in our pedagogical skills that we used to teach using case studies, or we used to deliver lectures using case studies, and those cases are actually developed by someone else. As a teacher, we also have some responsibility to develop a case study of our own for our own students. And I believe that actually we live in a society where we have enough of materials available everywhere that we can develop case study, and those materials are sufficient to develop case studies, because ultimately whatever actually we are teaching in the case, those cases and those materials are sufficient to infuse or to provide our students with sufficient materials to teach a particular concept or theory, or give some understanding of the idea. So the question is, what is a case? So the case is primarily, it is a story. The stories, it may be a story of a failure, a story of some success, a story of some incidents, some accidents. Anything can be there in that story. Only thing is that that story should be sufficient enough to provide some decision making points to the readers, or to illustrate how a particular decision has been taken, or to put the reader or the listener into the shoes of the protagonist, that if that person would have been there in that story, what would have been their decision. So that is basically case is primarily a story, whatever may be the type of a case, but basically this is a story. And as we have seen that there are different forms of stories, some of the stories are actually narrated, some of the stories are actually used written in the third person, some of the stories are written in the using the first person, second person. So there may be different forms of stories, long stories or short stories, stories related to one individual, one society, one company, anything it can be there. So particularly this is a story. And why actually it is called a case? Because this actually describes about one person or one situation or one incidence. That is the important thing. And the case actually it puts the reader in the shoes of a protagonist. In every story there has to be certain protagonist, or some situation may be there. The protagonist may be some natural person, maybe some artificial person. So that story or that case it puts the reader into the shoes of protagonist. There is no right answers per se. It is believed in case study that there is no right answer, because we deal with a real life situation. So suppose if I ask you, like in the morning, or if in the morning you would have thought like whether I should bring an umbrella or not. So in the morning, whether you should bring an umbrella or not, so there is no right answer. There are people that who brought umbrella and ultimately they faced some rainy situation, or there are people who did not brought umbrella and they have also brought rainy situation. Ultimately it is the time later on how actually you have handled the situation that will actually decide whether the decision was right or wrong. But apparently at the beginning, in that situation where actually the case study is there, the cases are there, there is no right answer, there is no wrong answer. I have developed a case, written a case, published, and actually I know what actually had happened ultimately in that case. But when actually I put the same case in my class among the students, and the students arrived at different decisions, different answers, and we cannot say that the answers actually given by the students are actually right or wrong. Then actually what had happened in the real life situation. In the real life situation something else had happened, but looking at the case, something else is actually being provided by the student, some other decisions is being provided. And another thing, that case was written long back, maybe 10 years or 12 years or 15 years back, and at that time the situation, the technological environment, the sociological environment was not uh, or it was different than that of today. So the decision that was actually taken by the protagonist in the case 10 years back, the same decisions may not be applicable now, because the environment, sociological environment, technological environment, everything has changed. So there is no right or wrong answer. So why actually we are using this case? Because the students or managers or decision makers, they will always want more information but won't always have all the informations, and they are forced to make decision based on the information that is available. This is the real life situation. And in real life, the managers, whosoever it is, they always have to make some decisions, and to make those decisions they will require some informations. In a case we try to provide all those informations, whatever is actually being required by the managers or the decision makers in a real life situation, so that they will be placed into the shoes of the protagonist in the same real decision making situation, and ultimately they have to make that decision based on those information. In real life also we do not have all the informations, in case also we do not have all the informations. So if we are not getting all the information, need not to take any stress, because in real life also managers, they are not getting all the information as and when required. Always there will be some decision lag, some decision flow, or some lacuna will be there. And in real life also the managers have to make decisions based on the available informations. In case also, as a writer, we have to place all those information whatever is available, and based on our assumptions and our intuition we will be developing that case which actually suits into a particular classroom for particular theory or particular subject. Now let us go back to the history, what actually case is all about. having an understanding of the idea about the case, what exactly is a case, let us go back to some of the stories. I think we all have heard the stories of Panchatantra. There are multiple stories, hundreds of stories are there available in the book called Panchatantra, written by Vishnu Sarma. And what is those stories? Every story, one story actually deals with one message, one wisdom, one idea. So, using those stories of some animals, some people, some villagers, one story is used to deliver one message, one idea, or one pearl of wisdom to the readers, so that that particular concept can be understood by the people who actually read those stories. So that is the Panchatantra. So we can say that every story in Panchatantra, every story is one case. So that was the method, that was the modus operandi of teaching those moral values to the people, to the pupil in the Gurukuls, using this Panchatantra. So that case study is not a new phenomena. It is already there in our scriptures long back. So example is Panchatantra. So if you just go through the stories of Panchatantra, you will find that all the stories have one more moral lessons. So to teach that moral lesson, to moral values to the students, if we directly tell the students about some lessons that may not be attractive to them, that may not be appealing to them, so the stories were the best way to convey that message. So all those stories, they develop a basic understanding of a particular issue. This Panchatantra, they are not dealing with a very critical issue, but those stories were very effective, and they actually inculcate the basic understanding of particular moral and cultural issues in the society, and they develop that instinct within the people. So that is about the Panchatantra. Let us go to another story. This is a story of Vikram and Betal. We have all seen this Vikram Betal episodes on television during our childhood, and the story is known to everyone. But when this Vikram used to catch hold of this Betal, and while going back to the destination, the Betal, he used to narrate one story to the Vikramaditya. And at the end, Betal used to ask certain questions like what you would have done had you been there in the situation of the protagonist, exact case study situation. And but those decisions were not so simple as it was there in case of Panchatantra. So actually this involves critical thinking. Now here the Vikramaditya is placed into the shoes of the protagonist of that story, which is actually narrated by the Betal, and now he is forced to make decision if he would have been there in the same situation, and certain conditions are there. If you do not answer, then you will die and something like that. So that is the Vikramaditya is placed in the similar situation, and this is also a different kind of case. That is, the entire book is there that is called Betal Pachisi. So where there is a compilation of 25 excellent stories, and actually all those stories were 25 case studies different to relating to the different aspects of life, or we can say the different theories. There all these stories are actually explaining different theories. So the question is, why case study? The Vikramaditya and Vishnugupta, this is fine that during those days there was dearth of paper, and that's why the dearth of this electronic media and electronic devices, the paper was also not there. So using those stories, the stories were only way to communicate or to disseminate the idea from one person to another person. But now why case study? Why we need to do this case? So actually, being a student of higher education, we know that if we have to understand, if we have to learn medical, we cannot learn medical sciences simply sitting in the classroom. If a student is undergoing MBBS or MS or any kind of medical courses. So that student need to go to the medical college where some patients, real life patient will be there, and those students will be performing their surgery or some medicine or some experiments on the real life patient, so that they will be familiar with the various concepts of medicine, various concepts of surgery and various medical issues. And one more thing here, it is worth mentioning that the term case study is actually derived from the discipline called medical science, because the doctors, the researchers in the area of medical science, they used to perform all those experiments on one person, and here every person, every patient is one case, and the findings of that particular case later on it is tried to be discussed in the conferences, and then the treatment or the diagnostics or the diagnosis, and then later on some new drugs or new methodology, a new therapy used to be developed. So actually the case study, that term, the nomenclature itself has been derived from medical science. So every patient is one case, and he need to be studied in detail, in depth, and the findings needs to be discussed with the other fellow friends, which may be generalized, which may not be. That is a subject to be discussed later on. So the point is, if someone wants to study medical, he or she needs to go to the medical college, where not only they will be imparted medical related education in the classroom, but they will be taken to the hospitals, and that's why in every medical college there is a hospital attached to it, so that the students who are actually learning the concepts of medicine or medical, the concept theories of medical, they can physically observe all those theories and concepts on the patients. That's why every medical college is having some hospital also. It is mandatory. So class to be taken to the medical college frequently. If someone wants to study engineering, then class has to be taken to the workshop to teach engineering, because you cannot teach engineering simply sitting in the classroom. The students have to be taken to the workshop in front of the machines. They should be exposed to the machines so that they can have some idea about the machines, and they will be learning about the concepts of engineering in that laboratory. Similarly, this is a lab on physics. So if someone wants to study physics, they have to be the class has to be taken to the physics workshop. This is actually a photograph of museum. So anyone who is studying history, they need to be taken to the museum, so that they can that can be taught history or anthropology, chemistry or botany. So anything out of this has to be taught. It cannot be taught simply in the classroom. So the class always need to be taken to the lab or to the workshop or to the industry or to the medical college, so that the students can have the real life exposure of what is actually happening in the real life world in those fields, so that the students will not be having only textbook knowledge, but they should have some real life feeling of their particular subject, how actually a chemical looks like. Simply learning about the chemical bonding and chemical reactions in the school or in the classroom, and then actually seeing those chemical reactions gives a different feeling. So, and that's the difference between teaching and learning. So in order to complete the learning, the class has to be taken to the real life situation. But the problem is, what about the management and the business administration? Because we deal with the industry. Management and business administration is actually it deals about the industry, or we deal about the market or the finance. And if we have to teach our students about the industry or about the market, it's not possible always to take the class into the industry because of the various reasons. One thing is that it's not possible. Physically it is not possible, it is not feasible that every time we are taking the class to the industry, so that students will be exposed to the various dimensions and the aspects of industry. In industry, lot of things are their production, their operations, supply chain issues, marketing issues, finance issues. The class cannot be taken to the industry all the time because of the logistical reasons. Class cannot be taken to the market to teach marketing all the time. Class cannot be taken to the bank to teach about the banking all the time. Class cannot be taken to the insurance company to teach about the insurance and the concepts of insurance all the time. Then how to give them the exposure, physical exposure? So the class cannot be taken to the bank, class cannot be taken to the insurance company, class cannot be taken to the industry all the time. But the industry can be brought into the classroom, and that is through the cases. So we cannot take the class to the industry all the time, every time, but industry can be brought into the class every time. So how to teach management effectively? So class cannot be taken to industry, marketplace always, but industry can be brought to the class. The question is how? It is through cases. Every case deals about one particular industrial solution, one problem, or a market related problem, a finance related problem. So using those cases, the industry or the market or that particular segment can be brought into the classroom, and it can be discussed in the class. And as we have seen that using those cases, we have to create a situation in the class that every student feels himself or herself into the shoes of the protagonist, that if he or she would have been there in that situation, what would have been her decision. That is the beauty of case study. So now about the case structure. What should be the structure of a case? How the case has to be written? So it's not that difficult. I think we all have seen the movie Jurassic Park. Even if someone have not seen, need not to take any stress. If you have seen any Bollywood movie, that is also fine. Now, why actually the mentioning of this Jurassic Park or any Bollywood movie or some Hollywood movies are also copying the same thing? Why it is actually important? If you have seen the movie, any very popular Hollywood movie, you will find that in the very first shot, the problem is actually being delivered, is reflected on the screen, that the viewers will have some idea about the problem the moment the movie starts. But after that, they will be going into the what it is called, like the story starts from the beginning. Okay, preview. Okay, after some time the story starts with the preview, and then gradually the story will be developed, and then finally they will be reaching to the climax, and then some decision has to be taken by the protagonist, which actually you as an audience will also feel yourself involved in that decision. Similarly, this is also one style of writing case. And those who are actually teaching case studies, you will find that in the very first paragraph, the glimpse of the problem is given in the very first paragraph, and from the second paragraph onward, the story is actually just started, it narrated, and then the author builds up on the story, and then at the end, the author leaves the story at such a place that now the class has to take a decision. Class means the students or the reader or the listener to that story, they have to take a decision, just like Vikramaditya, what would have been the correct decision in this situation. And all those informations are provided in the case that is required by the audience, by the listeners or the readers, which is required to take a suitable decision in that particular situation. So this is one structure of the case. Okay, it does not mean that this is the only best way of writing case. Ekam sat vipram bahuda vadanti. So this is only one aspect of the truth, but you can opt for other styles also, other structures also. Just see this. Three Idiots. This is a kind of narration. Okay, and this style is called narratology, where one person is actually narrating the entire episode, all the incidents one by one. Actually, he is narrating. So this is called narratology. So this is also one kind of case structure. Then there are certain cases which focus on one person, one event, and one issue. And all the developments, all the informations, all the discussions given in the case are actually just to focus on that one person. It may be one person, or it may be one event, or some very critical issue. And only those informations which are actually related to or which are actually relevant to that particular issue or event or person will be discussed, and other informations will be just discarded. Just see, I think each one of you have seen the movie Anand. So here the person is actually Anand, and his character is actually being reflected on, actually completely discussed in the entire movie, and only those part of his character which are actually related or getting affected by the other protagonists are only being shown, but the focus is on one person. This is also one kind of case. Okay, so having a basic understanding of this case structures, it may be Anand, or it may be Three Idiots, or it may be some Hollywood kind of movie, or it can maybe any other. I'm not saying that these are the only three way of writing case studies. There may be many. I'm just narrating, or I'm just stating three. So we can develop a case. Now the question is how to develop that case. So first thing is that in every case there are certain critical issue, certain decisions. We need to identify what is that critical issue in that case. If you have read the case like strike in the space, strike in the space. So what is the critical issue there? And this is completely a hypothetical story. Okay, like somebody is going into the space, and then some people are there, and ultimately there is a strike in the space, and there are certain critical issue. And if we just highlight this issue, then one thing is also getting reminded, that a case may not be real. It can be imaginary also. As we have seen in case of strike in the space. Those who are teaching management, they might be familiar with this case, strike in the space. So the case can be imaginary also. But every case, there has to be certain critical issue. That critical issue may be certain problem, maybe some decision, maybe some concerns that needs to be highlighted, or maybe some theory. It can be anything. Like using that case, you can explain certain theory also. Like certain case can be used to, there are so many theories in management, and one case can be developed to teach or to explain the relevance or that theory to the students. That is one critical issue. Sometimes there may not be any theory, there may not be any problem, but a case can be written just to illustrate the success story, as we have seen in case of a case. I do not know how many of you have read it, Jack Welch winning strategies. This is a case, you can just note it down, Jack Welch winning strategies. This is a book written by Jack Welch. Who is Jack Welch? He was the CEO of General Electric. So the case is written on that Jack Welch winning strategy. So there is no problem here. Actually, the entire case is written and designed just to highlight the success story of Jack Welch. So that can also be one type of case where there is no problem, but the issue is that we need to highlight the success story. Okay, that can also be there. So the critical issue, it can be any specific issue, or it can be some specific concept, it can be some specific theory, it can be some specific discussion. So it can be anything. So where is this decision point stated? So ultimately, whether it is a specific issue, a specific theory, a specific discussion, a specific concept, ultimately that decision points needs to be stated somewhere. But where it is? Sometimes the decision points are stated very clearly in the case. At the end of the case, the decision points are stated, and normally these type of cases are used for the students, for the beginners actually, where the decision points are stated very clearly. Like the question is, what should be the role of Mr. X or Mr. Y in this situation, or what he would have done, what he should not have done. These kind of questions will be there. But a mature case or excellent cases are those cases where the decision points are not explicitly stated. Now it is the reader who have to read the entire case, and then the reader have to find out the decision point. definitely while reading the case, the reader will be finding some problem, that there is some problem in the case, that some problem is there. Where is that problem, and what decision he has to take or she has to take, the protagonist has to take. So the decision points may be explicitly stated, it may not be explicitly stated, but I repeat, some of the excellent cases, some of the best cases are those cases where the decision points are not explicitly stated. Rather, it is the reader who have to read that case and find out what decision is there, because it is we know that the finding of the problem is the biggest problem. So once the problem is defined, just reading the case, then the solutions can be defined, solutions can be arrived. But the first point is that the problem has to be found. So this itself is a task for the readers to find out the problem, what the problem is in that case. So introduction and very end, this is just for the hint that if you are reading certain case, so most of the time the decision points are actually given in the introduction. As I told you, that just like any Hollywood movie where the climax is shown in the very first scene, and the very first scene will give you a glimpse that this picture is actually related to some problem, maybe related to some animal, anaconda, or Jurassic, or this dragon, or what it is called, some animals, some big animals are there, or the decision points are given at the end, or sometimes in some of the cases these decision points are not explicitly mentioned. So if you are in a hurry, like where is the decision points, I'm giving a tip that most of the time decision points are given in the introduction itself. That if you just read the introduction very cleverly, you will find that what is the problem in that case. It will give you a glimpse of the decision, glimpse of the problem. So now the decision points are given in the introduction. Then after that there will be a lot of information to help make a decision. And remember, you are taking a decision, you are making a decision in a real life situation. So in a real life situation, we do not know which one is the relevant information, which one is not the relevant information. Suppose we have to take a decision related to fixing a market price. So fixing a market price, only the cost accounting data may not be relevant, but we need to have an idea about the size of the market. We need to have an idea about the different segments of the market. We need to have an idea about the probable customers to whom we are going to serve. Okay, and whether our customers will be able to pay that price or not. So actually, it's very difficult that which information is important to arrive at a decision or which are not. And that's why, just like in a real life situation, we collect all those informations and we take decision based on all the information. Here also, in a case, we need to identify or we need to source all the informations and present it in a case logically and sequentially. So sometimes we need to have the information about the culture and ethos of the company, history and background. That will give us some information about how actually the decision has to be taken, because every company, every organization have their some culture, some certain ethos, certain ethics they have to follow. So what is actually correct decision in one company may not be correct decision in another company. For example, suppose there is a problem that company need to arrange for a finance. So one company may be very comfortable with the borrowed capital, that they can borrow, they can take a loan from a bank and they can start their business or they can fund their new project. But another company may not be that comfortable with borrowing money. Why? Because again, the culture of that company, you might be knowing that like in if it is a Islamic company or if it is a Muslim company, so Muslim companies are against the concept of the idea of borrowing money on interest. So if it is a Muslim company, definitely they will not borrow money from a bank in return of an interest. So that's why the ethos and culture of the company is also important to take a decision. Though if you have studied all the concepts of financial management, you will not find anything related to this, but this is the culture of that company or the culture of the CEO which is actually deciding whether we should go for the borrowed capital or not. But the logical rules of financial management will say that if you require money, you can go for the equity capital, you can go for the borrowed capital, borrowing from the bank or some other term lending institutions. But if you know that your boss or the company is having some ideology, some affiliation with some Muslim organization, and Muslim organization, the Islamic finance, in principle, they are against this interest based lending. So that's why the ethos and culture of the company is very important. The place in the industry, larger context of company in the industry, where is the place of that company in the industry? These are just some ideas, okay, like what kind of information you will be requiring. So what is the place in the industry? Suppose if you want to use some new product, so for manufacturing new product, new technology will be required, okay. But what is your place in the industry? So long as you are having no place in the industry, or your ranking is 50th rank or 100 rank, any big company will be transferring you the technology. They will be very comfortable in transferring technology to a very small company. But the moment if you start growing and your position is number 3, number 2, and you are challenging number 1, none of the companies will be transferring any technology to you. So technological procurement is fine if you are number 100 in the industry, but if you are number 4, 3 and 2, nobody will be transferring any technology. So in that case, you have to develop, you have to spend heavily on your own research and development. And that's why most of the companies, you will find they have a very huge budget for research and development. So history of the company, you need to know about the current marketing plans of the company, relevant informations and all these things. So ultimately the net sales or product life cycle, communication mix, market share, contact, all these informations will be required to arrive at a decision. So just we need to collect all those informations. I'm not saying that these are the information which are mentioned on the slides are only relevant, and this is just indicative that if you are writing a case to arrive at particular decision, to explain one particular concept or theory to the students, so along with that theory, lot many other informations and ideas are also required, and they need to be introduced to the students so that they can arrive at a decision. So cases are pedagogical tools or vehicles to learn not only about the company but also about the business basics. So because you will be knowing about the company and about the business. Suppose this is a case on Tata Steel. So as a student, we are not familiar with neither Tata nor Steel. So using that case, first of all, we'll have our understanding about the steel business, and then the company's corporate structure of Tata. Then having an understanding about the steel business and the Tata Steel, then we'll be actually ready with our decision. Okay, so that's why these cases are important. Now, what are the outline for a case? So normally in any case, we start with introduction. Now, what should be there in the introduction? As we have seen at the beginning that the first paragraph may itself give a glimpse of the problem. So in the introduction, it start with the protagonist. Protagonist means the character in that particular case. So it starts with the protagonist, give a sense of the person making the decision and a sense of the critical issue. So the introduction itself will give you a sense of the critical issues, as I told you that, and it may be 1 pages or 2 pages or 1.5 page, that is, but again these are just indicative only. You should not think that I have written 1 or 2 pages, so you should also write an introduction equivalent to 1 page or 2 page. It may be 1 paragraph also, it may be 3 page also, it may be 1.5 page also. So this is just indicative that an case normally have this much length of introduction. So the introduction, it starts with the protagonist, because ultimately if you are introducing a case, so first of all you will be introducing the protagonist, who is actually making that decision and what is the problem that he is in hand, what is the issue in hand with the protagonist. So the introduction section and especially the first paragraph itself will be giving you the sense of the critical issue with that protagonist. Then we may think about the company background and history. That is also important, because just now we have discussed that the company background, company history, or the culture, and all those things that are very important in arriving at a decision. Okay, so general information about funding, evolution, key events that shaped the company, it should also be there. It may be of 2 pages, more than 2 pages are also there, depending upon the company. There are certain cases which I have seen that, if you just remember the case of even this Jack Wells winning strategy, or micro freeze, or some other cases are there which are actually of 50 to 60 pages in length. So all these page limits will not apply to them. So this is just indicative. Then company information about the company, industry information, the industry in which the company belongs to. So we need to understand the context within which the company operates. What are the economics of the industry? Who are the competitors? Who are the suppliers? Who are the other players in the industry? What are the dynamics that affect that industry? All these informations are actually required to be placed in the case, so that that person who will be arriving at a decision, he have the idea or she have the idea about the industry as well as the company. Then company specific related to decision. So the more in-depth information in two above directly related to the critical issue should be there. And then finally at summary. Sometimes summary is there, sometimes summary may not be there. It's open-ended case. Bakhtin was one philosopher who said that everything in this universe is in transit. So there cannot be an introduction, there cannot be any conclusion. Everything is in transit. So that's why sometimes the summary is there, sometimes summary may not be there. Okay. Now, what is the process of writing case? So first thing is that articulate the critical issue and the decision points, and this is provided by the protagonist. Okay. So first thing is that we need to articulate the critical issue. Whenever we have seen anything, anywhere, in any company or in any business, in any organization, we first of all we should have the sense that this is very critical issue, and this particular case or this particular business or the firm is dealing with this critical issue very efficiently, or it is not dealing very efficiently, but the issue is very critical, and using this case this particular issue can be highlighted or can be explained to the students. So first of all you need to identify that critical issue, and the critical issue, it can be any theory also. So suppose you have seen uh, some arrangement in some organization, and the idea came to your mind that this is a very excellent issue of assembly line production, or some marketing issues are there, some guerrilla marketing, or some any other marketing issues are there which can be explained to the students using this case. So first thing is that you have to articulate this issue with yourself. Okay, then you need to identify one protagonist, because in every movie there has to be some character, some heroine has to be there. So who will be that hero, who will be explaining that issue? That needs to be identified in the at the beginning. Then summarize the information needed to make the decision. So all those information related to that critical issue, that needs to be summarized. Okay, and research may be necessary to fill the gap. Carefully consider your interviews as a mode of research. We'll come to that later on. So first of all you need to consider your interviews as a mode of research. Sometimes interview may not be a mode of research, simply you may go into the organization, you can have an observation of the things, that can also be, that is also possible. Sometimes the cases are built based on the secondary data, that is also possible, that you are not conducting any interview, you are not conducting any data, the primary data, and the entire case is written based on the secondary data. But again it is advisable to always go for a first hand verification of the data that is being provided by the organization. Okay, so that you can have the feel of the data. Secondary data, they will not be giving you that feel, but once you visit that organization, so you will be having a feel of the data, feel of the organization, and feel of the business and industry that will help you in shaping the case and the case study. And list necessary data for analysis to make the decision. Source may come from alumni, or alumni means from any ex person. It may be necessary, research may be necessary to fill the gap. Then do the background reading on your company and the protagonist. You know the critical issue, so you should have a sense of the kind of information needed to make a decision. You know the critical issue. Your protagonist, the organization, they do not know. For them, you are just a visitor who is actually an obstacle in their work, who is going to disturb them for some times, that is, or any matter that is not understandable to them. So they do not know, but it is actually you who know the critical issue. You have the sense of what kind of information is required from a particular company or a firm, and what kind of informations are needed to make a decision. So it is you who have to be very much aware about all those basic understanding. So that's why it is always advisable to do background reading on your company and protagonist. Okay, because if you are going into the company, most of the time your company or the person who will be dealing with you, who will be providing you all the informations, may not have that much of the time, because your job is to write a case, but his job is not to write a case, but he has some other job also in the organization, and simultaneously he is or she is helping you as well. So first of all, it is your job to do the background reading of your company, and that will help you also, because if you have some understanding of the company, the culture of the company, then you can have very well connect, you can establish the connect with the person. And once you have established a connect, and if the person also started believing you that you are a person who is in the same zone of thinking or ideology where that person is, then it is easier for you to extract data from that person about the company. Then while going for the interview, it is always advisable to prepare interview questions, but also have some sense of potential answers. This is interesting. You should prepare interview questions, but also have some sense of the potential answers. If you do not have any sense of the potential answers, then you may not be able to verify all those things, first thing. And then the further questions, the interrogative form of interrogation may not be that effective. So first of all, you should have those questions, and then some sense of what may be the potential answers. This potential answer may not be only one answer, maybe 2 3 4 potential answers they might be there, and out of 2 3 4 potential answers, one might be the correct answer. Maybe out of 4, none of them may be correct answers, and some new answers might be delivered by the protagonist. That is also possible. So ask some questions you actually know the answer. Why? But will help you get a sense of the company culture. So if you know the potential answers, and if you are asking all those questions with an close-ended options, that whether this or that, so the person who is who is being interviewed, the interviewee, have that idea that you have the understanding or you have the sense of the company culture, so they will be feeling connected with you. So once they are feeling connected with you, so now your job is done. You can you can derive any informations from the persons. So that's why it is always advisable to prepare a list of questions with some potential answers, and some questions may be asked where actually you know the answers, so that, and you should give like close-ended options, like whether this is because of this or that, so that they will have an understanding that you are not a layman to this field, you are not a layman to this company, or you are not new to this industry, you have some idea about the industry, and this also reflects your seriousness to that particular person. Then formulate questions that will gather appropriate data for making the decision. It is said that if you want correct answers, the questions should also be correct. So the correct questions should be asked to the correct person so that we can get the correct answers, the correct information. So that's why this formulating questions that is relevant for gathering the data, that is important. And prepare your interviews appropriately. Prepare your interviews appropriately, fine. And then have fun and take the time to engage the person in your project. Okay. Now the introduction, how the introduction should look like. So it should contain a hook, something that grabs the reader's attention and compels him or her to keep reading. Usually this takes the form of stating why the case was remarkable. We have seen books, we have read books, we have seen movies where the very first paragraph or the very first scene in that movie or web series or some paper, it strike us, it gives us some idea about that this is very interesting case, this is going to be a very interesting story, let us go in detail. So the introduction section is just like that. Okay, so the introduction section, it should contain a hook that will grab the reader's attention and compel him to keep reading. But one thing is that don't go overboard or don't exaggerate. Okay, and should move from the hook towards the hypothesis. So once we have generated the necessary interest, attention among the readers, then we should move towards the hypothesis. Hypothesis means what is actually being proposed in that case. This see the interesting, those many of us are the teachers and some young research scholars are also, hello, some young scholars are also present in this webinar. So see, hypo means any disease where there is a deficiency of something, we prefix the word hypo, and thesis is actually from theory. So where there is a deficiency of theory, we use the term hypothesis. Hypothesis, there is a deficiency of theory. So once we have generated enough interest among the readers, now we should move towards a hypothesis, because every case discussed with certain theory, certain concepts, certain assumptions, certain specific discussion or idea. So that what is the hypothesis? So it should move from the hook towards a hypothesis. Once we have established the hypothesis, then there should be a discussion, and later on it is the reader who will be deciding whether that hypo should be removed from the thesis or not. And ultimately case is also one kind of research, so hypothesis may be there, may not be there. Some cases may have hypothesis, some case may not have. And give a brief outline of the structure of the paper to follow. It may be there, but it may not be there. Some of the modern papers, some of the modern cases, they give a brief outline of the structure, like the rest of the paper is organized as follows, this paragraph is written. But some of the papers or some, it may not be there. So it is up to the reader. So this is not mandatory that it should have an outline of the structure always. Sometimes it is there. Now of late many papers have started using this particular structure, that an outline is proposed in the very first section itself. Then the basic format of writing a case is that it should have an abstract, a keyword, introduction section, case report, discussion, conclusion and summary, and references. Sometimes what about these references? If it is a completely first hand draft, then what kind of reference will be there? Like if it is a story, what references? Because a case may not be only illustration or explanation of one story, it may have some secondary informations. Okay, so all those secondary information needs to be validated and it should be placed in the reference section. In a case, sometimes we need to take help of some letters, some emails, some reports. So all those reports, those letters, so those discussions should be mentioned in the reference section. The case may be based on exchange of letter between two persons. So those letters, maybe the description about those letters may be given in the reference section. So it can be anything. So this is just a basic format for writing a case. Most of the time these are used, but again, this is not mandatory that the same format has to be used, because if you have read some of the excellent cases, master cases, which are actually taught in the B schools from 2-3 decades, and still they are taught to explain those concepts, they do not have explicit mentioning of these headings, though they have if they actually follow the same structure, but explicitly this structure is not actually being followed. Then some essential components of writing a case: organization, there's sort of content. Visuals are very important. Visuals means it may be some graphs, some charts, some diagrams may be there to explain those case, because you should remember that a person who is working in that industry, he or she is very much familiar with that industry, but a student who is reading in the class, he or she is not familiar with that industry, nor he is familiar with the company. So how actually that students or the reader will be able to get himself or herself connected with that industry or with that company? So the visuals have a very important role to play in this case. So, but it does not mean that all the data should be presented using the visuals. Visuals are there, but like how much visuals should be there, then a case writer has to decide. Too much of everything, as we have know that too much of everything is not good, so too much of the visuals or too less of the visuals, so you have to decide a trade-off between disclosure and not disclosure, or giving a visuals or not giving visuals. So visuals are very important, but too much of the visuals again will create a kind of disinterest among the readers. Then some mechanics like this, that is the maybe methodology or style. Then what kind of a style has to be followed? So as we have explained in the beginning, the style maybe in the first person or second person or third person, or some narratology may be there, some the modern forms of writing are also there, like one issue at a time, then again some discussion, then again some issue, again some discussion. These kinds of styles are also actually being followed. Then some research work is also there in a case, because case study is also one kind of research paper. So the organization may not be doing that case, may not be doing that research, but you as a researcher can do some research and place the result of those research inside the case study, so that the decision makers will be having some advantage of your research work, so that the decision maker can arrive at a decision, and only those research findings would be there which is actually directly related to the case. Then what kind of data? So you should include a list of all the data sources used. Be as specific as possible, include date and time of information when necessary, and some synoptic overview has to be there. Touch on the main features with an eye towards the mesoscale analysis, and don't have to be limited to a single analysis time. Okay, then should be logically organized. It should tie everything in the previous 4 sections together, reminding the reader why the study is important, and summing up the evidence that supports the hypothesis. Because you have started with some hypothesis. The hypothesis again may not be explicitly written in the case, but again before you have started a case, you have some idea like which issue, which theory, which idea, which concept are you going to explain to your readers using this case. So all those evidence, all those things should be presented logically in that case. Towards the figure, that I already told you that be sure that figures have properly labeled contours with clearly indicated units. Don't use any figure, don't use any visual which cannot be labeled. Label means you have to give a name to that figure. So the figure number and the name has to be there for every figure, for every diagram. And figure must be numbered and captioned. Be sure that the figures are numbered in the order that you refer to them in the text. Okay, now why the numbering is important? This is not only for the case study, but even if you are writing some research paper, then also numbering of the tables, numbering of the figures, and numbering of any kind of diagram is important, because if you have to refer to that figure, simply suppose that figure is placed on page number 1 or in the introduction section, and in the conclusion section or maybe on page number say 10 you have to refer to that figure. So instead of writing that the figure which is explained on page number 1 says that, instead of saying that, if you say as per figure number 1 or as per figure number XYZ, so that is more appropriate, or as per table 1, as per table 2. And sometimes we used to write like the following figures, the following tables, or the above mentioned table or the below mentioned tables, we used to write in that way. That is also giving that is also problematic. What is that problem? Suppose you have written that the following figures or the above figures are giving a certain idea, and while typesetting the paper in the press, because the person who is typesetting in a press, his job is or her job is to place the figures or to prepare the articles in a way that is most suitable for publication. So the figure that actually you have placed after a particular paragraph in actual publication, that figure may be placed above that paragraph also. And if you have written that the following figures are giving an idea or the following tables are giving an idea about one particular thing, then you may land yourself or your readers will be will be in trouble, because the figures are not below but the figures are placed somewhere else. Okay, and that's why always it is a mandatory kind of thing that the figures must be numbered, and wherever those figures are actually referred, they should be referred using the figure number. That figure number 1 states about this, figure number 2, figure number 3, figure number XYZ. That figure number should be mentioned, and figure number that figure or the table or the diagram should be referred in the text anywhere using that number only. So wherever that figure is placed, maybe above or below or in the first page or the last page or maybe in the appendix, so that is not going to distract the readers, because it is figure number 1 is figure number 1 only, and it can be referred anywhere, wherever it is placed. Never include a figure that you don't refer in the text. Okay, simply don't place a figure in the paper in the case that has not been referred in the text. Simply because it is looking beautiful, it should not be placed. Place a figure, place a diagram or any table if it is actually required in that case. If it is actually required in the paper, then only that figure or the diagram or the case or the table has to be placed into that paper. Otherwise, you should not be simply placing that figure because it is just looking beautiful or it is having some information which you think that important, but actually that is not referred in the text. And think carefully about the required figures. They are required for a reason and you should refer to them in the text. And you could use your cross sections to discuss the boundaries. So, and one strategy is to create far more figures than you will need, and use them in writing your rough draft. Because writing your rough draft, because once you are actually writing your rough draft using figures, so figures have the tendency or figures have the advantage of conveying more informations using lesser number of words. So while writing your rough draft, when actually you are interviewing that person or when you are actually visiting that organization or having some observations, so you can create some figures. So later on, those figures can be explained in the text in the case to explain the situation more effectively. And once you are confident you have things the way you want them, make a final version of the figures you decided. And if you do this, you can be sure that your figures are in proper order and every figure you use is essential. That is about the figures. General tips on writing: avoid loose, informal style. Stay away from casual figures of speech. Don't write too tersely, either stick to all simple sentences. Yeah, this is very important. There is a difference between literary writing and academic writing. We are actually writing a paper or a case study for academic purpose. So this academic writing is different than that of literary writing. Okay, so in academic writing, whatever, there should not be any kind of ambiguity. And the academic writing, the sentences are understood in the same way in which actually these are written. They do not, it is always better to use sentence that is not giving any other meaning, otherwise it will be considered as ambiguous meaning, ambiguous sentence. So ambiguity should be avoided. For example, there is a very popular dialogue कि आज मेरे पास घर है, गाड़ी है, बंगला है, प्रॉपर्टी है, बैंक बैलेंस है, तुम्हारे पास क्या है. This is very specific, but the moment the other protagonist is saying that मेरे पास माँ है, now मेरे पास माँ है, this is capable of multiple interpretations. So those kind of sentences should not be used in any kind of academic writing. Then it is always better to keep it in the third person. Okay, but again there are certain limitations to this and disclaimer. And what is that disclaimer? Though I'm saying that we should write a paper or a case in a third person, but this is also a difference of culture. Americans, they do not take so much of the stress with respect to the first person or third person. So that's why you will find in many American cases or American papers also, they very easily they use the term I or we. They write the paper in the first person, and whereas the British, they always stick to the third person, and they try to stick to the third person. So more than this academic, this is actually a clash between the two cultures. So it depends where actually you are submitting your case. If it is a British journal, it is always better to write in a third person. If it is an American journal, they do not take too much care. They don't care whether it is written in the first person or the third person. Okay, so that's the point. Then always go for the proofreading. But last tip, if you make use of the outside material, be sure to cite the source in the text and provide detailed information in a reference section and the end of the paper. And be sure to follow the paper format. Every case have certain format. So follow that format. That is most important. Okay. Now, having understood about the writing do's and don'ts of case study, what are the different types of cases, what are the precautions has to be taken to develop a case. Now, develop a proposal form from a case lead. Now, what is case lead? Okay, many a times we find some interesting idea. And as we have discussed in the beginning of this class, that we find some interesting idea, and from that idea we may think of teaching one particular theory or one specific issue to the students, and we think that this particular case is an excellent example of this particular theory, and if this case can be discussed in the class, this can be an excellent case, and our students will be able to understand this theory using this particular case very effectively. So that idea that this particular issue is important, this is a case lead. Okay, so there are different stages of a case. One is the case, first one is the lead, then developing a framework and visit to the organization. Okay, so once we have developed a case, then developing a framework. Okay, what is that framework? For example, you have seen some case, some lead, and using that lead, you have seen that some very interesting thing is going on, some very interesting advertisement is going on, some very interesting, some innovative management practice is being practiced in a particular organization. Some times you may find that some school is actually there in some locality which gives admission only to the failed students. This is very interesting case. Now using that lead, what kind of framework you will be developing? You may find that a company is hiring only those employees who are not very good in studies. That is a case lead. You may find a school is giving admission to students who are actually not good in studies or who are school dropouts. That is an interesting case. You may find a case lead that a business which is doing wonders, which is doing excellently well, all of a sudden they are not doing well. Why they are not doing well? Nothing changed, but only some change has been taken place in their management, and because of that the business is not doing good. Or reverse is also possible, that some businesses are not doing good, but as some simple change in the management structure or simple change in their product design has created remarkable impact on the overall business. So that is a lead, and from that lead you have to develop a framework, like using that lead, what can be taught to the students, which theory is appropriate, which specific issue is appropriate, which specific concept can be taught to the students. And simply concept is fine, but how that case has to be presented, what are the informations will be required. So from that lead, entire framework has to be presented and developed. And once this framework has been developed, then we should plan a visit to the organization. Okay, and that's why you'll find that other two steps are written in black color and the first three steps are written in red color. The reason is, most of the time most of the time uh, the case writing process, it ends with a plan to visit to the organization. Once we have visited the organization, we will find a completely different scenario than what actually we have heard in the newspaper or in the magazine or in the social media. Or the visit to the organization is not granted, or we have visited the organization but the information that was required has not been provided. Anything may be there. So if everything is positive, then we should be moving towards the fourth step of writing cases and then preparing teaching notes. Now, what is case lead? So first thing is that you should keep your senses open. God has given, or the nature has given us five senses, five sensory organs. So if you are keeping all our organs, sense organs open, then there will be enough of case lead available in the air, in the environment, that our sense organs will grab. And we only thing is that we need to identify all those needs. Okay, so it will be based on our own experiences, it will be based on some newspaper or magazine report. Some newspaper have reported something, that can also be an excellent case study. Some magazine reports have reported something, that can be one excellent study. Own experiences, like one case I have written, like me and my scholar have written, and that was my own experience, that we have visited to one cafeteria near our institute and we have seen some interesting business model they have developed. Okay, and what was that business model? That in order to eliminate competition, they have adopted a roster format. What is that roster? That there were two competitors in the locality, so both of them were suffering from their own competition. So ultimately they have decided that in 1 month, one person will be opening the shop, opening the restaurant in the daytime, and the other person will open in the night, and in the next month they will reverse that roster. So that is our own experience, and we have seen, and ultimately we have decided that this is an excellent case of adoption of roster format in a food joint, and we have written that case. Personal contact, your conversation. Sometimes our personal contact, like one of the paper we have written, only because I was there in the student welfare office, and we have some access to the informations which actually we could fetch, and ultimately we have written. Match leads potential with the theory. Now every lead may not be matched with the theory. So ultimately that the point that we are highlighting from the very beginning, that every lead have the potential to explain certain theories. So what is that lead's potential to explain a particular theory or particular concept? That should be matched. And once we have matched, then we should move to the next level. So clarity of practice theory, it has to be there, typicality of situation. The next is assessing the potential. Once we have identified that leads potential is there, then how to assess the potential? Whether it is accurate, it should be assessed for its accuracy. Potential to build a leads database, that database, whatever the database will be required, the data are required, whether all those data will be required available or not, whether we have the potential to have access to all those database, or we can create some database, that is also essential. And decision making situation clear. Ultimately, with all those available data, available stories and explanations, whether the decision making situation is getting clear or not, that is the question we need to answer. Then availability of the data adequate, whether the data is adequate in terms of number, in terms of quality, that also we have to ensure. And resources available to follow up the lead. The lead is very interesting. Sometimes the lead is very interesting. Like in Pakistan, the one bag of rice is costing 10,000 rupees. This is a lead, but we do not have the resources sitting here in India to follow all those leads. So whether we have the resources available to follow up the leads, but suppose if you have some friend in Pakistan, some collaborators in Pakistan, we can have that resources available to follow up that particular lead. So we have to assess whether we have that resources to follow up the lead. So accuracy, then the database and the resources, and availability of adequate data in terms of number and qualitative. This is essential to assess the potential of the lead, that lead can be have the potential and it can be converted into an effective framework. Then developing a framework. So to develop a framework, first thing is that we need to have a background reading. Simply like one particular framework, though we are a teacher, we are teaching, but again, that background reading of that theory or that concept is essential. And again, we have to relate that theory with the present case or the present lead in hand. Okay, a priori framework, not a straight-jacket pulls in the theory. So it's not a straight-jacket that sometimes we have to manipulate, sometimes we have to do some homework in order to place the case into a situation that will explain the theory. So it is not a kind of straight-jacket that this particular case is explaining all the theories, or this particular theory in a way that has been explained in the literature. It may not be. So sometimes we have to use some data from here and there so that it can be placed in the framework. And homework on organization or unit, that is organization's philosophy, company and other related materials, authorization for entry, proof of identification, all these things we should keep ready before approaching a company for organizational visit. And then establishing the credibility of the writer is also very essential. Gives you framework for preparing and visit the organization, visit and organize your writing. And then plan for organization visit. So here, once you are planning for the organization visit, so the roles and responsibility of the case writing team, and list your assumptions and contingencies. This is also very important. So if you are writing a case in a team, and most of the time we are writing a case in a team, so the roles and responsibility of the team has to be well defined. Then your assumptions and contingencies has to be listed in advance. That will help you later on with dealing with all those contingencies. Then again, check all your assumptions again. Alertness, thinking on your feet, aware of promises you are making, don't make any false promise. And what plans for the repeat visit. Always keep some scope for the repeat visit, because in the first hand you may not be having all the informations, all the data that you are thinking. Once you are preparing some draft, then you may be finding that some other information, some other data are required. So that's why always keep a scope for the repeat visit. Then visit to the organizations. Use multiple data sources. Don't rely on only one data source, that document or interview or observations or archives or artifacts. Use multiple data sources. This is called triangulation technique. To prove one particular point, one particular idea or concept, use multiple data sources. That document is also saying the same thing, interviews are also saying the same thing, or if the protagonist is saying something, that whether it is backed by the document or not. If suppose the interviewee is saying that our sales are growing at the rate of 100%, then do you have the document? Just check their annual report and whether that sales are actually being reflected in the annual report or not. Just check it. Your observations, everything will be there So whenever you are planning a visit to the organization, so you should have the ability to use multiple data sources and collection of data, skills in interviewing, documentary analysis. So interviewing is a skill. So how to interview, that is a completely different discipline, different domain. But using that interview, you have to collect all the information, all the essential data backed by the documentary analysis. Where document? From the same organization itself, those documents should be extracted, and initial and immediate drafting while on the way back. Why actually while on the way back? Because otherwise you will forget many of the things. So that's why the initial drafting should be done immediately, maybe sitting in the organization, or at least latest by while you are coming back. So the initial drafting should be done as soon as possible. Otherwise the dangers are always there that you might be forgetting a lot of essential data. Warning: do not rely on one source. Familiarize with handling qualitative data. Do not rely on one source. And qualitative data, like, which is not explained in numbers, so you should have some expertise in dealing with the qualitative data, because once you are interviewing and you are just believing, basing your decision based on your observations, so you may not have that much of quantitative data. So you should have that expertise, that based on observations you should have, you will be able to find, you will be drawing some inferences about the organization based on the qualitative information, qualitative data. And then finally, writing. So minus to zero draft to final draft. So actually minus, I will just add -2 to 0. So when actually you are preparing the first draft, that is actually called -2 draft. And this -2 draft should be circulated to your friends, and you just ask a question to yourself: do you have enough friends, enough person in your list who will be ready with their suggestions to your draft? It is very difficult to find a reviewer, find a proofreader to your draft. Proofreading is actually different, but like a person who will be giving very constructive suggestion to your paper. You will just mail your paper, and even if you have some very good person who will be giving some suggestion to your paper, you will find at 95%, 99% of the time, people actually they give their suggestion with respect to the grammar. They just simply check the grammar, do some grammatical corrections, and they will revert back to your paper. So that is very important. So -2 draft, so you should have some people in your team who will be reading your paper, and they are ready with some constructive ideas. Using their constructive ideas, you should prepare your draft. So from minus to zero draft, and then finally to final draft. Always go for the proofreading. It's very essential, because we are not native English speakers. So maybe there are some grammatical errors in our paper. So always go for some proofreading. Who was very good in language, we should do that, and after that only that final draft should be prepared. Coherence, putting the key decision points in order, that has to be there. And be able to focus on actor and timeline. It should be like that story should be focusing on the actor, on the timeline, and it's so that actually it is easy for the reader to focus or to understand or to assimilate the story. That is essential. And exhibits, every case will find some exhibits. Those exhibits are actually part of that case, and those who have done this case study, you will find that actually the exhibits, we normally ignore those exhibits while reading the case, but while analyzing the case, we find most of the time we find that those exhibits are actually most essential to analyze the case than actually the tables or the diagrams given in the case. But how much exhibit should be given, that there has to be certain control over that. If your exhibits are so essential, so important, put it in the form of diagram and tables within the case. Okay, so there has to be some control over the exhibits. Exhibits means they are those tables which are actually placed, not tables, some informations placed after the case. So that is called exhibits. And finally, teaching notes. Every case there has to be a certain teaching note. Without teaching note, it is not a case worth being publishing, because if you are submitting it to the journal, they will be asking for a teaching note, because as I told you that every case is written keeping in view certain theories, certain specific issues, certain specific concepts in mind. So how those cases has to be taught into the classroom, so for that teaching notes are essential. How the instructor will be handling that case into the classroom, so that's why a teaching note is essential. So final draft and teaching note, and this is most difficult stage. So from your analysis of your case and from your objective, you have to do your analysis of your case, that is called teaching note. So how to develop that teaching note, we'll be discussing tomorrow in the next class. So this is the modification of test this is how the case draft, modification of case draft has to be there based on all those informations. And once teaching note is prepared, now this is a complete case has to be submitted. Now in the next class we shall be focusing more on the teaching note perspective of a case. Thank you.